Hey guys, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Laura, for those of you that do not know, and today's video is going to be another trope recommendations video, and today's trope is going to be enemies to lovers, which is actually a video that I've done previously, and if you haven't seen that video, I'll have it linked down below. So this is going to be kind of like part 2, because so many people request like part 2 for this, because enemies to lovers is a very popular trope that I know so many of you guys love. So over the past couple of months since I made that last video, I've been trying to pile up some new enemies to lovers to share with you guys, and I think I have a pretty decent list to share with you guys today. And as always, make sure you leave me a comment down below letting me know your favorite enemies to lovers books, but for now, let's get into mine. The first one on my list is one that I've been talking about so much lately, and that is Bad Boys Break Hearts by Michaela Smeltzer. This is a book that I read pretty recently, and I just absolutely fell in love with it when I read it, and it was just so unexpected. And it follows a girl who goes to college, and when she's there she meets this boy who she actually remembers from her childhood as being her best friend. When she was younger, she ended up having to move away, so she kind of lost touch with him. But when they meet again on campus years later after having no communication with each other, they just really don't get along. In fact, he is very mean towards her, and she doesn't really know why, and so the story kind of unfolds in that way. Very typical enemies to lovers. There isn't anything super like new or super original about this plot. I realize that. However, I just was obsessed with this book. I really loved the characters, and just the progression of the story was so fun. I literally read it in one sitting. It was that good. I just couldn't put it down. So if you love that kind of addictive writing style paired with like a really fun classic trope that you know that you'll love, I really think you guys will like this one, so I highly recommend it. Next book on my list is called Talon. It is by Carrie Ann Cole, and it is a part of the Ashes and Ember series. It is book 4. However, you do not have to read this whole series to read this book. It can 100% be read as a standalone, so keep that in mind. This book follows two people who end up kind of being a part of like a social experiment where they put in like a list of things about themselves, and then they get paired with somebody to get married with, and they have to get married kind of like Married at First Sight. Is that a show? Or like 90 Day Fiance, like kind of like that style. Like they just meet, get married, and they have to live together, and I guess it's like a bunch of psychologists taking notes and like seeing the interactions that they have and whatever, and it's just like for an experiment. And so these two people do it, they get married, and they literally don't have anything in common, and they just do not get along at all whatsoever. It's not necessarily like the enemies to lovers where it's like they're mean to each other, but it's like there's definitely no romance happening until a little bit later into the book. And so for that reason, I think it kind of falls under the enemies to lovers trope, but I really loved this book. I love the progression of the relationship. It's kind of like a bunch of different tropes in one. It's like arranged marriage, enemies to lovers, like kind of like stuck together trope because they're just kind of forced to live together and be together. And so yeah, the book kind of goes from there. It's a really unconventional but really fun read. I think a lot of you guys will like it, and I'm a fan of this whole entire series. I really think you guys should check out the whole series. The first book is called Storm. I love them all, but this one in particular I think is really good if you're looking for an enemies to lovers type book. And it's a fun one. It's very different, and I think you guys will like it. Next up on my list is Mr. Masters by T.L. Swan. This is a favorite of mine about a girl who moves to the UK to become a live-in nanny, and she thinks that she's going to work for a single mother. When she gets there, she realizes that it's actually a single father and his 2 kids, and she just kind of like moved all the way from Australia. It's not like she's gonna let that deter her plans, so she does end up moving in, but her and this man do not get along well, and she just has a very rough, rocky start to her job, and so she kind of has to decide what to do with that, and the book kind of goes as that. And I really love this book because it's like they live together, there's a lot of tension, it has that enemies to lovers-ness where like they kind of don't get along in the beginning, but it kind of starts to evolve where they start to like each other, and there's just a lot of really good tension in this book. I love whenever things are kind of drawn out and you like know that it's getting there, kind of like a slow burn, but it's a little bit better because it's like they're just there with each other 24/7, and it's like obviously this is going to build into something. So I really like this book for that reason. I just think it's really great. I love the characters. I love the length of this novel. I think it's pretty long, so there's a lot of development to happen in it. And I just really enjoy how this book goes, and as far as enemies to lovers go, I think it's kind of on the more tame side of enemies, but I still think you guys are gonna like it, so I would highly recommend it. Next on my list is Fallen Too Far by Abby Glines. This is a classic favorite of mine. It is the first book in the Rosemary Beach series by her, which is a humongously long series. However, this is book one. You can read the books like kind of interchangeably. You don't necessarily have to read it in like a series progression, but this is the first book. It follows two characters who are definitely fitting the enemies to lovers trope. This book is technically a step-sibling relationship, but it's not really. They don't really consider themselves that, and I feel like that's also just like not the core point of the book. But this girl Blair, after her mother dies, ends up going to look for her father, and when she gets there, this younger boy answers the door and he's having a party, and he's super rich and super arrogant and rude to her, and she's done literally nothing to him, but she just needs a place to stay, and so she ends up moving in there. And again, it's kind of similar to Mr. Masters where they're like stuck under the same roof. However, in this book, it's definitely more enemies to lovers. He's actually very mean towards her and she doesn't really understand why, but she also kind of gives it back just as much, so it's kind of fun. She's definitely one of those characters who doesn't take any shit from the guy, which I really appreciate. So I really love this book. I love this series. If you want to read it, it does end kind of cliffhangery, so you might have to continue some of the next few books to kind of finish up their story. But I promise it's worth it. It's so gut-wrenchingly good. I love Abby Glines books, and this one is not an exception. Next up is Dreams of 18 by Saffron Kent. This is about a girl who ends up having a crush on her next door neighbor, aka her best friend's dad. They move in when she's like in her teenage years, and she gets to know the guy's son, and they become really close. And she kind of is always watching his dad, constantly has this kind of like little crush on him. But on the night of her 18th birthday, she sees him outside and she decides to make a move and she kisses him. And also he's a teacher at the school and somebody records them kissing. It gets spread around. He ends up moving away. And she is like in disarray over this and needs to go find him and apologize and make things right. And she just thinks that she's like in love with this man, so she's like, I have to follow him. And when she finds him, he's so mean to her, doesn't really want anything to do with her. Obviously, she kind of ruined his life in a way, so he's just not interested in anything with her, even accepting an apology. So it kind of goes from there. It definitely has that enemies to lovers vibe. It's also an age gap book, best friend's dad kind of in a way. So there's a lot going on in this book, but I really, really love it. I love Saffron Kent's books. I've read almost all of them and I've enjoyed every single one. I think they're really unique. The writing style is always phenomenal and I just think they're super fun. So this one is no exception and I think you guys will really like it. And it definitely does play off of that enemies to lovers trope. Next up is Credence by Penelope Douglas. This is definitely one of the more scandalous books in this video because this book is just really insane in general, but it is about a girl whose parents both pass away in a really tragic way and she doesn't have any family to go see other than this one step uncle that she has who she's never really met, and he lives like in the wilderness and she's used to this like lavish LA lifestyle, but she decides to go move in with him and his two sons. And upon arriving there, she has a lot of tension with everybody in the house. They don't really want her there, especially the sons. They're super rude and aggressive towards her. Again, she's never met any of these people, but a romance does arise with one of the people in this house, and I don't even want to spoil it because it sounds crazy, but when I was reading this book, I couldn't even tell who the lead male protagonist was. Like, I didn't know who the love interest was, but it was kind of fun to like figure it out, so I'm not going to spoil that for you. But it is a little out there, it is a little crazy, so I will give you that, but with any Penelope Douglas book, there's always a bit of crazy. So I'm gonna leave it at that, but if you want something a little bit out of the box, enemies to lovers wise, this is definitely a good pick. Next book on my list is Burnout by Coralie June. This kind of has a similarity to the first book where this girl's mother dies and she decides to go out and find her half-brother. And he ends up inviting her to live with him for her senior year of high school. So she decides to do so. He has a roommate who's also a teacher at the high school and they're best friends. And when she gets to this house, the roommate is immediately kind of aggressive with her, doesn't really want her to come in and ruin his best friend and her brother's life, and doesn't really know what she wants. So there's this immediate kind of like tension between the two characters and kind of like anger. but it kind of develops more quickly than you would think into a kind of romantic like thing. They kind of end up connecting a lot more than they thought they would originally. And again, he is her teacher, so it's like a teacher student. She is 18 years old, and then like her kind of dealing with the grief of her life and her brother and all this stuff. So there's a lot of like other aspects to this book other than romance. It's a lot of dealing with her past and kind of learning how to move on from grief. And I don't know, I really loved this book. It was one of those books that I like randomly found on Goodreads but ended up falling in love with immediately. So I highly recommend it. I think a lot of you guys are really gonna like it. Last book on my list is one that I kind of wasn't sure if I wanted to put in the video, but I decided I would, and I would just kind of like tell you why I was like on the fence about it. And that is Tell Me Pretty Lies by Charlie Rose. Charlie Rose is an author who I've read in the past, I've recommended in the past. Her books are kind of hit or miss. Sometimes I really like them, sometimes they're just lacking a little bit for me. This is one of those books that was a little bit lacking, but I still ended up really enjoying in the end. It is about a girl who moves in with a new family when her mother gets remarried or like just starts dating somebody new. And they're like super rich and they have sons, and she gets involved with one of the sons, but then something tragic happens, and that's like where the book starts. So there's like this whole beginning part of the book that you don't really get to experience. When the book starts, you're already under the impression that this girl had a relationship with one of her so-called stepbrothers, and there's now beef. Like, you don't know what the beef really is, but there's beef. It's definite. Something's going on. So that's kind of like where the book starts. It kind of just plops you into the middle of it and leaves you to kind of figure out what's going on, which I didn't love. So immediately it was a bit rocky for me. The parents end up breaking up, so it's not technically her stepbrother anymore, but they go to the same school. So it kind of goes from there. They have this really strong like enemies, hatred for each other, at least he does towards her. And then you see the story kind of evolve and you kind of learn what happened previously and all that. So I don't know, this book overall, I think some people would really like it, and I did really end up liking it at the end. It just took a little bit to kind of ease into, so I will warn you about that. And let you know that that's how I felt towards it, but I do think that some of you guys could end up actually really liking the book, so I thought I would throw it in, let you know about it, and that's going to be the last book in the video. So those are the enemies to lovers books that I think you guys should definitely check out. Let me know if you have read any of these and what you thought about them, or if you plan to read any. Definitely tell me in a comment down below. Other than that, make sure you guys are subscribed to my channel if you're not already, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. You can also follow me on all of my social medias linked down below, like my Twitter and my Instagram, my TikTok, even my Goodreads, and you can find my book down there, my Wattpad book, so lots of fun stuff in the description box. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you very soon for my next one. Bye!